So, Luch has a unique backstory. She was born in Guatemala, and she was actually a gift to my landlord, Domingo. Domingo brought Luch to the house he was renting, and it just so happened that the current tenants were moving out. So I first met Luch when I came to see the house, and it was love at first sight. She was so tiny, tinier than she is now, if you can imagine that. But she was so smart and really affectionate and just wanted to be a part of every conversation. She followed us from room to room as I looked at the house, just kind of sitting and observing. When I finally moved into the house, however, she was gone. And nobody really knew where she went. And it was thought that a pack of stray dogs had kind of chased her out of the home. But then a week after I moved in, I walked out of my kitchen and she was just there, as if no time had passed. I still don't know how she survived that week by herself alone, but I know that she's a fighter. When she first came to me, she was full of parasites and fleas and had a pretty gnarly eye infection, which gave her this ever suspicious look, but she persisted. She and I became fast friends, and she'd perch on my shoulder like a tiny parrot while I did errands and cooked around the house. Her favorite thing to do was yoga. I would put out my yoga mat and she'd come and stretch with me and play, and it turned out she could even give pretty good yoga assists. When the pandemic hit, we were with each other almost 100% of the time. Most cats would have complained about that, but she seemed to never get enough of time with me. Whenever I traveled or left the home for any extended amount of time, she'd come running up and lay on her back and roll around and just meow and meow and meow at me. When I decided to move back to the US, things got tricky. I actually held off the decision for months because of travel sanctions at the time that didn't allow for people to bring pets from certain countries because of rabies concerns, and I didn't want to leave her behind. But luckily, in May of last year, we got our chance. I pulled together enough funds for her to get the official paperwork, and we took flight. When we arrived in the US, she was going to have to be kept indoors for some time before she could be let out again. And at first I was worried that it would be hard to keep her inside. I even bought like a tracking device for her in case she made a break for it. But as it turned out, she just didn't really want to leave. She wanted to stay with me indoors. She seemed to really enjoy her new pampered lifestyle and was getting quite used to it. She is a sweet cat. Anyone who has met her or watched her for me for a time will tell you that she is loving and playful and constantly making friends, even with the neighbors out our window. So when Luch stopped being interested in playing, and most of all when she stopped coming to the door to greet me when I came home, I knew something was wrong. What started out as just a few visits to a primary care veterinarian soon turned into a situation that was scarier than I could have ever imagined. One night after our second trip to the primary care vet, I noticed that Luch had started shaking physically. At that point, I felt I needed to do something. So at 11 p.m. that night, I put Luch in a carrier and we went to the ACE's Emergency Animal Care Center. From there, things just piled on. It was in the waiting room that I found out that she was going to need an emergency blood transfusion. And when I saw the bill, I applied for a credit card in the lobby. Luckily, I was able to put enough funds together to cover the upfront deposit needed for her care. But as the days went on and her condition became apparently more critical, the bills also increased. with more testing and diagnostics and more time that she needed to stay in the hospital. Her condition was also worsening. She stopped eating entirely and needed to have a food tube placed so that she could receive nutrition. And most frustratingly, she was also having some kind of cognitive issues that were causing her to behave oddly, keeping her eyes wide open, turning her head suddenly from side to side. And she couldn't really walk more than a step or two without toppling over. When I came to visit her, she was far from the Kat that I used to know. But regardless of what she was going through or how many machines she was attached to, she would come up to me and start purring and bury her little head in the crook of my arm, like she knew on some level that I was there. So I wanted to share this as a way to remember how Luch was before all of this started, and to ask for hope and ask for your support. I hope that you would fall in love with her the way that I did, and I hope that her story is one of success. So thanks for listening and watching and supporting.